March 12, 1938. German troops marching into Austria. Crowds cheering the Anschluss. The world watching in fear and confusion. The treasury of the Hofburg, the relic room, the display case containing the dark, cracked spearhead that centuries of rulers had venerated. The object he believed symbolized his destiny. He was no longer the rejected art student staring at it from the other side of the glass. He was the man the world feared. And now, for the first time in history, the spear of destiny was within reach of someone who truly believed his life and his survival depended on it. What happened after Hitler took control of that relic, and how, from that moment on, every attempt to kill him failed, is where the legend becomes truly disturbing. He was not yet the architect of a world war, not yet the dictator who would plunge Europe into darkness, not yet the man whose name would become synonymous with destruction. He was something far smaller, small enough that the world barely noticed him, a failed art student. And like all failures, he carried the humiliation deeply. A city of grandeur, a life of poverty. Gustav Klimt painted golden visions. Sigmund Freud explored the human mind. Composers filled cafes with music, but Hitler saw none of that beauty as inspiration. To him, the city was a reminder of rejection. The Academy of Fine Arts Vienna had refused his application. Twice. The professors described his drawings as technically weak. His figures lacked expression. His architecture sketches, though detailed, missed the creative spark they demanded. Hitler took it personally. He moved into cheap boarding houses, the kind filled with cigarette smoke, cold walls, and men who lived day to day. He survived by painting postcards of city buildings and selling them for a few coins. He was poor, angry, and increasingly isolated. He wandered Vienna for hours, its narrow alleys, grand churches, quiet libraries, and endless museums. He studied architecture, history, and especially the objects that symbolized power. Vienna became his university, not of art, but of bitterness. The Hofburg's treasure room. There was one building in particular he visited often, the Hofburg Palace, the heart of the old Habsburg Empire. Inside was the imperial treasury, a collection of relics gathered across centuries. Crowns of emperors, jewel-encrusted swords, ceremonial armor, medieval insignias, relics said to carry divine power. Most visitors admired the glitter. Hitler focused on something else. Behind a pane of old glass lay a long, dark spearhead, cracked and reforged with metal bands. Its surface was dull, aged, almost lifeless, yet surrounded by stories. The label identified it as Die Heilige Lanze, the Holy Lance, the Spear of Longinus, the weapon that, according to Christian tradition, pierced Jesus Christ on the cross. The power of a legend. Hitler began reading everything he could find about the spear. He learned that Charlemagne carried it into battle and died only when it slipped from his grasp. Otto the Great used it to unify the German lands. Medieval kings believed the spear guaranteed victory to whoever possessed it. Napoleon allegedly sought it during his rise, but never found it. Most historians dismissed these as legends. But Hitler was not a rational observer. He was a man searching for meaning, any meaning, that explained why he felt destined for greatness despite failure. And then he encountered the prophecy. Whoever holds this spear in his hand holds the destiny of the world, but when he loses it, he shall perish. 2. A young, humiliated Hitler, those words were not myth. They were revelation. They told him he was not powerless. His failures were temporary. Destiny belonged to those who seized it. It was a story he could place himself into. A story where greatness was not earned but inherited through a symbol. The spear became his secret obsession, the object that transformed a failed artist's wounded pride into a dangerous sense of purpose. The roots of a belief. Why did the spear affect him so deeply? Because Hitler's personality was shaped by two forces, a desperate need for validation, a belief that he was chosen for something greater. He read occult and pseudo-historical books that claimed history was moved by hidden energies, relics, and symbols. Ideas that serious scholars ignored, but Hitler consumed hungrily. He was a man who needed to believe that all the suffering, poverty, rejection, and isolation were not meaningless. And the spear gave him that meaning. It whispered, "You are meant for more." The World War that fed the myth. In 1914, the world changed. World War I erupted, and Hitler enlisted in the German army. It was the first time in years he felt a sense of purpose. The trenches were brutal. Mud, lice, artillery shells, poison gas, and death everywhere. Hitler was wounded twice. He survived gas attacks. He lived through battles in which entire companies were wiped out. Many soldiers believed survival was luck. Hitler didn't. Each narrow escape reinforced the same idea he had nurtured in Vienna. I am being protected. Later in speeches, he described the war as his awakening. He believed he had walked through death and come out chosen. And behind that belief was the memory of the relic he had stared at in the Hofburg, the spear of destiny. Loss, humiliation, and fury. Germany lost the war in 1918. The empire collapsed. The economy crumbled. Millions felt betrayed. But Hitler took it personally, almost religiously. He blamed politicians, communists, Jews, anyone he could label as enemies. His rage was volcanic. But beneath the rage was something quieter and more dangerous, a conviction that the war was not the end of his destiny. He had survived too much. He had been spared too often. He believed fate was leading him somewhere deeper, somewhere darker. The failure that didn't stop him. After the war, Hitler joined a small political group in Munich, the German Workers' Party. He became its most dynamic speaker and soon transformed it into the Nazi Party. Through the 1920s, he built a movement fueled by anger, nationalism, and conspiracy. He attempted a coup in 1923, the Beer Hall Putsch. It failed. He was arrested and imprisoned. But instead of collapsing, his ego reshaped the experience. He began to believe every setback was a trial. Every failure was part of a larger design. Destiny was preparing him for a higher role. He wrote Mein Kampf in prison, blending political ideology with his belief that history was guided by unseen forces. For him, the spear was no longer just a relic. It symbolized everything he told himself: greatness through struggle, power through destiny, meaning through myth. The rise of a man who believed in signs. By the early 1930s, Hitler's political star had risen. The Great Depression shattered Germany. People were desperate. They sought strong voices. Hitler offered certainty, purpose, identity, and blame. He became chancellor in 1933. He dismantled democracy. He built concentration camps. He crushed opposition. But behind his political moves was something more personal and secret. He still believed in symbols of divine power. Inside the Nazi Party, Himmler and others pursued occult activities, searching for relics and ancient artifacts. It was not just propaganda. It was part of the ideology they whispered behind closed doors, that the new Germany needed a mythic foundation, a connection to ancient power. And Hitler had his own fixation. The spear he had seen as a nobody, a relic he now believed was tied to his fate. The obsession awakens. When Hitler gained full control of Germany, he quietly began planning something that had nothing to do with politics and everything to do with his belief in destiny. He was going to reclaim the spear. To him, this was not looting. It was completing a circle. He believed he had been chosen. The spear symbolized divine authority. Controlling it would secure his rule. Possessing it would protect him as he reshaped Europe. His obsession with the relic deepened as his power grew. He mentioned the spear to close confidants. He studied medieval emperors who had held it. He believed their victories came not from military strategy, but from the spear's influence. Now, he wanted it for himself. The return to Vienna. In 1938, the opportunity arrived. Austria was in political chaos. Hitler pressured the government. Threats were made. Troops massed on the border. On March 12, 1938, German soldiers crossed into Austria in what became the Anschluss, the annexation of Austria into Nazi Germany. Crowds filled the streets in Vienna waving swastikas, cheering the new regime. Publicly, Hitler framed the event as the unification of German-speaking peoples. Privately, he had something far more specific in mind. He went directly to the Hofburg, the old treasury, the relic room, the glass case he had stood before as a poor, humiliated artist. Now he returned not as a nobody, but as the most powerful man in the German-speaking world. The spear and the moment he claimed it. Eyewitnesses later described him walking into the treasury quietly, almost reverently. He did not rush. He did not smile. He moved with the intensity of someone confronting a long-awaited destiny. When he stood before the spear, he reportedly stared at it in silence for several minutes. To him, this was not plunder. This was the fulfillment of the prophecy he had clung to since his youth. He ordered the spear to be transported to Nuremberg, his spiritual center of Nazism. For the first time in centuries, the man who controlled Germany, the man who believed he was destined to reshape the world, held the relic that legends claimed controlled the fate of empires. In Hitler's mind, the protection of the spear had passed to him, and whether coincidence or something stranger, from that moment on, every attempt to kill him failed. The seed of a darker story. Historians still debate the meaning of this obsession. Some say it was simply superstition. Others say Hitler understood the psychological power of myth. But what is undeniable is this. The spear gave Hitler a sense of invincibility. Not metaphorical, literal. He believed he could not die while he possessed it. He believed destiny was on his side. He believed every assassination attempt would fail. And for years, he was right. Bombs malfunctioned, guns jammed, conspiracies collapsed. Hitler walked away from dozens of attempts unharmed. To some historians, this was luck. To others, it was coincidence. To Hitler, it was proof of the prophecy he embraced as a starving artist in Vienna. But legends always have a darker second half. Because the prophecy did not end with victory, it ended with a warning. But the day he loses the spear, he shall fall. And when Hitler finally lost control of Vienna and the spear, his downfall began almost immediately. The relic that had symbolized destiny for centuries slipped from his grasp, and with it, the empire he built began to collapse. The date was March 15, 1938. 3 days after German forces marched into Austria, the crowds in Vienna still filled the streets. Flags hung from every balcony. Bands played martial music. Cheering echoed through city squares as if an old empire had returned to life. But deep inside the Hofburg Palace, far away from the speeches, fanfare, and political theater, something else was taking place. Something far older. Something shrouded in legend. Something Adolf Hitler believed would change his fate forever. It was the day he finally touched the spear of destiny. The spear leaves the treasury. Hitler entered the relic chamber with a small group of SS officers and select curators. There was no film crew, no propaganda cameras. Some events, even for dictators, happen in silence. Hitler stood before the glass case as he had decades earlier when he was just another poor visitor. But now the roles had reversed. The guards who once barely noticed him now waited for his commands. The curators stood nervous, unsure how to address a man who had become a political earthquake. The room grew silent. Hitler leaned closer to the glass, eyes fixed on the spearhead. One witness later claimed his breathing quickened. Another said his hands trembled slightly. Whether these accounts were exaggerated or not, one thing is certain. This was not a simple artifact to him. It was the physical symbol of the destiny he believed had been guiding him since his youth. He gave a single command. "Open it." The curator unlocked the case with shaking hands. For the first time in nearly a century, the relic of emperors was removed from its resting place. Hitler reached out, not slowly, not timidly, but with purposeful intent, like a man reclaiming what he believed was rightfully his. His fingers touched the cold metal surface. His expression hardened. He held it for several seconds. Those present later said he seemed transported, almost in a trance. Then he gave his next order. Send it to Nuremberg, the city he considered the ceremonial heart of the Third Reich. This was the moment, quiet, unrecorded, unseen, where Hitler believed he had fully stepped into the prophecy. Whoever holds this spear controls the destiny of the world. At that moment, he believed he had seized not just power, but fate itself. A shift in his behavior. In the days following the acquisition of the spear, those close to Hitler noticed subtle changes in him. He seemed more restless, more confident, more reckless, more convinced of his own infallibility. Senior officers later recounted that his belief in destiny became almost obsessive. He spoke of history as if it were a script already written, one in which he was the central figure. He referred to himself as chosen. He told his inner circle that nothing would stop him, not bullets, not bombs, not conspiracies. And then, the attempts on his life began. Attempt 1. The misfired bullet. The first attempt came only months after the spear was moved to Nuremberg. It was July 1938. Hitler arrived at a military parade in Bavaria, walking along a route lined with cheering crowds. Unknown to the SS, a former Austrian soldier named Johann Georg Elser had positioned himself in the crowd. He carried a pistol concealed under his coat. As Hitler approached, Elser raised the weapon. He took aim. He pulled the trigger, and the gun jammed. Elser panicked and tried to fire again. Nothing happened. SS guards tackled him instantly, beating him to the ground. The crowd screamed as he was dragged away. Under interrogation, he said the gun had never malfunctioned in its life. It was confiscated, examined, tested dozens of times. The weapon worked perfectly, but not at the exact moment he fired at Hitler. To Hitler, this was the first confirmation. He told Göring and Himmler, "You see, fate protects me." Attempt 2. The bomb that failed to detonate. The second attempt came in November 1939. This one would become infamous. A carpenter named Johann Elser, not the same man as before, spent months secretly building a bomb with a sophisticated timer. He placed it inside a pillar behind the podium at Munich's Burger Beukeler, where Hitler delivered his annual speech commemorating the 1923 coup. Elser timed the bomb to explode at the exact moment Hitler would be speaking. But that year, for reasons no one fully understood, Hitler left the event 13 minutes early. The bomb exploded on schedule. The entire hall collapsed. 8 people died. Dozens were injured. Hitler was already on a train heading back to Berlin. The timing was so precise, the escape so narrow, that even his generals called it miraculous. Hitler told his staff, "Providence has spared me again." The spear and the sense of invincibility. With each assassination attempt that failed, Hitler's fixation on the spear intensified. He called it his protector, his symbol of destiny, his confirmation. The more the world tried to kill him, the more convinced he became that supernatural forces were safeguarding him. This new confidence influenced his political decisions. He pushed the military to accelerate the rearmament of Germany. He became bolder with territorial demands. He pressured Europe into giving him Czechoslovakia. He invaded Poland without hesitation. He acted as if consequences did not apply to him. To him, they didn't, not while he held the spear. Attempt 3. The sniper who froze in 1940 during a tour of captured French territory. Another assassination attempt unfolded. A French resistance sniper positioned himself overlooking a bridge Hitler was scheduled to cross. He had one clear shot, perfect angle, perfect silence. Hitler stepped onto the bridge. The sniper aligned his sights. His finger tightened on the trigger. And then, he froze. He later testified that he could not pull the trigger, as if an invisible force pressed his finger back. The opportunity passed. Hitler crossed safely. The sniper fled. To Hitler, this was not luck. This was the spear's protection. The general staff grows uneasy. Not everyone shared Hitler's mystical confidence. Inside the German general staff, including officers like Beck, Goerdeler, and Oster, the failures to kill Hitler were deeply frustrating. A bomb didn't explode. A rifle jammed. Snipers hesitated. Conspirators lost their nerve. It was becoming almost comical. These generals did not believe in relics or prophecies, but they struggled to explain Hitler's improbable survival. Some whispered that he had devil's luck. Others said he was shielded by something. Even cynical men who hated superstition found themselves unsettled. Hitler's close supporters, however, believed the spear played a role. Himmler, obsessed with the occult, encouraged these ideas. He saw Hitler's survival as proof of their ideology. The spear became part of the Nazi mythos. To Hitler, it was not myth, it was reality. Attempt 4. The Warsaw. Miracle. In 1941, as Hitler visited the ruins of Warsaw, the Polish resistance planned a bombing. They placed explosives under the road where Hitler's convoy would pass. The bomb was tested in advance. It worked perfectly. But on the day of Hitler's arrival, a sudden and violent rainstorm hit the city. The road flooded. The explosives, hidden in the ground, became soaked and failed to detonate. Seconds after Hitler passed, the rain stopped. Polish engineers later said the timing was uncanny. Hitler's response? The spear protects me. A dangerous belief takes hold by 1942. Hitler's conviction in supernatural protection was absolute. He believed fate guided him, destiny shielded him. No weapon could kill him. This was no longer a private belief. His decisions reflected it. He began rejecting strategic retreats, invading the Soviet Union against military advice, insisting on personal inspections near the front, dismissing warnings of assassination plots. Hitler believed he was untouchable, and as long as the spear remained in Nuremberg, he believed death would not touch him. Attempt 5. The briefcase that failed. The most famous attempt came in July 1944, the Valkyrie plot led by Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg. Stauffenberg placed a bomb-filled briefcase under the table during a meeting with Hitler at the Wolf's Lair. The explosion was massive. 4 officers were killed instantly. The building was damaged. Hitler survived with cuts, bruises, and a damaged eardrum. Investigators later discovered that the briefcase had been moved to the other side of a thick wooden table leg. The windows were open, allowing the blast to escape. Hitler had leaned forward at just the right moment. The odds of survival were microscopic. Even the generals who hated superstition began whispering, "How does he keep surviving?" Hitler's response: "The spear protects me. Fate protects me. I cannot be killed." The spear vanishes, and so does his luck. But destiny has 2 sides, and the prophecy that had fueled Hitler's obsession had a second half, one he ignored. When he loses the spear, he shall perish. In late 1944 and early 1945, the tide of war shifted dramatically. Allied armies pushed toward Germany. The Soviets approached Vienna. The Third Reich began to collapse, and something else happened. The spear was taken away. In April 1945, American forces captured Nuremberg. The relics hidden beneath St. Catherine's Church, including the spear, fell into Allied hands. Hitler did not know immediately, but within hours, events inside his bunker began unraveling. His generals abandoned him. Communications collapsed. Bomb shelters filled with terrified civilians. Soviet artillery hammered Berlin. Food and fuel ran out. His health deteriorated. For the first time, Hitler appeared afraid. He refused to leave the bunker. His confidence shattered. His faith in destiny evaporated almost overnight. The man who once believed the spear made him invincible now saw the truth he feared. He no longer controlled it. And if the prophecy meant anything, his fate was sealed. The prophecy fulfilled. On April 30th, 1945, surrounded by ruins, betrayal, and the collapse of everything he created, Hitler took his own life. The spear was no longer in his possession. The empire he built disintegrated. The man who believed destiny protected him had run out of time. Coincidence? Legend? Myth? Symbolic storytelling? Historians disagree, but even the most rational ones admit Hitler's survival through dozens of assassination attempts and his sudden downfall the moment he lost the spear remains one of the most unsettling patterns in modern history. September 22, 1935. At midnight, beneath the vaulted stone ceilings of Wewelsburg Castle, Heinrich Himmler lit 3 black candles and ordered everyone present to remain silent. Outside, the wind howled through the Westphalian hills. Inside, the air was still, unnaturally still. This was not a military meeting, nor a political ceremony. It was something older, a ritual, and at its center stood the man who led the SS, a man Hitler privately called El Sacerdote del Reich. Himmler believed that Germany's future, its victories, its survival, even its soul, depended not just on tanks, planes, or strategies, but on ancient forces hidden beneath the surface of history. For Himmler, relics like the Spear of Destiny were not museum pieces. They were keys. Keys to unlocking power that empires had once wielded and lost. That night, under candlelight, Himmler whispered, "We must reclaim what once belonged to the ancient kings." It was the beginning of a hunt for relics, for artifacts, for symbols of forgotten power, a hunt that would send SS expeditions across the world, into Tibet, into the Middle East, into the catacombs of Europe. But before those journeys began, They focused on the spear. The spear's shadow over the Reich. After Hitler seized the spear from Vienna in 1938, its presence did not go unnoticed in the highest circles of the Nazi leadership. Reports describe SS guards refusing to stand near it at night, officers claiming they felt watched in its presence, a coldness around the relic, even in heated rooms, electrical equipment malfunctioning near its chamber. Most ignored these accounts. Himmler did not. To him, the spear was not just metal. It was a vessel, an anchor, a connection to something older than Christianity, older than the Roman Empire, older even than written history. He ordered a private SS task force to study it. They worked only at night. They wrote reports in coded language. They never discussed their findings aloud. One of the researchers disappeared. Another requested a transfer and refused to speak of why. The SS burned their early notes. Something in those pages frightened even them. The Ahnenerbe, a secret order within a secret order to the world. The Ahnenerbe was just a heritage foundation, a historical society, a research institute. This was a lie. The Ahnenerbe was the occult wing of the SS, created to uncover ancient rituals, lost civilizations, relics with supposed supernatural power, evidence that Aryan ancestors ruled the ancient world. Of its 50 departments, several were dedicated to rune magic, sacred objects, esoteric symbolism, comparative religion, Nordic myths. Some of its expeditions are well documented. Others remain hidden under layers of classified archives. One file, now missing, was labeled Project Lanza, Project Spear. The surviving fragments suggest the Ahnenerbe believed the spear was not originally Roman, not Christian, not European. They theorized it came from a civilization that predates recorded history, a culture obsessed with power, dominance, and cosmic alignment, a culture whose ruins, they claimed, still whispered warnings. Himmler believed the spear was only one part of a larger puzzle, one relic among several that once formed a complete set. What that set did remains unknown. A secret meeting with Hitler. In early 1941, Himmler traveled to the Wolf's Lair to report directly to Hitler. Witnesses recall Hitler seemed distracted and irritated, until Himmler mentioned the spear. According to SS officer Hans Juttner, Hitler leaned forward and asked, "Have you discovered anything unusual?" Himmler hesitated. Then he said something that chilled the room. "My Führer, the spear is awakening." This was not metaphor. The Ahnenerbe had reported the metal radiated unusual electromagnetic readings at night. Patterns etched into the spear changed subtly under certain lighting. Guards heard whispers or faint echoes when standing alone with it. Hitler listened in silence. Then he ordered Himmler, "Continue your research, no matter the cost." For Hitler, the spear confirmed destiny. For Himmler, it confirmed something darker, that relics were not symbols of power, but sources of it. Unexplained events around the spear. In Nuremberg, where the spear was kept under SS guard, strange incidents continued. 1. The guard who saw a shadow. One night, an SS guard was found unconscious outside the relic chamber. He claimed he had seen a tall, dark figure standing behind the spear case. No such figure was recorded entering or leaving. He requested reassignment the next day. Himmler granted it immediately. 2. The room that grew. Cold engineers complained the relic room's temperature dropped significantly at night, despite closed doors and functioning heating. Thermometers recorded swings of 20 to 68 in minutes, doors rattling with no wind, metal objects vibrating without explanation. The SS blamed faulty equipment, but the equipment worked perfectly everywhere else. 3. The researcher who went blind. An Ahnenerbe historian reported an overwhelming flash of light while sketching the spear's carvings. He permanently lost vision in one eye. His last words before resigning, "Something was looking back at me." The spear creates division within the Nazi leadership. Not everyone embraced Himmler's occult obsession. Goebbels mocked the relic openly. Göring dismissed it as medieval nonsense. But even they noticed Hitler's strange reactions to the spear. Hitler visited it repeatedly in 1939, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for hours. He dismissed his guards during these visits. He always emerged pale, tense, and trembling slightly. One SS officer recalled, He walked in as a man and walked out as something else. The Ahnenerbe's darkest discovery. In late 1942, a secret Ahnenerbe team allegedly decoded markings on the spear. The translation, only partially preserved, suggested that the spear did not belong to Christ, was not a weapon of mercy, but a weapon of binding, used in rituals to claim power, bind fate, curse enemies, seal the life of the holder to the fate of the object. If the relic was ever taken forcibly from its bearer, his life force would unravel like a broken thread. It was not a prophecy. It was a warning. A private conversation reported later. Shortly after receiving the Ahnenerbe report, Hitler said to Albert Speer, "They think the spear protects me." Speer asked, "And what do you think?" Hitler replied softly, "I think it listens." Speer never forgot his tone. It was not confidence, not arrogance, not delusion. It was fear. The Allies approached Nuremberg. By April 1945, American forces closed in on Nuremberg. The spear was hurriedly packed into a crate and moved underground. Himmler ordered its location sealed, its guards sworn to secrecy. But secrecy did not save it. On April 30th, 1945, at exactly 2:10 p.m., U.S. forces discovered the chamber and seized the spear. That exact moment, confirmed by Allied logs, was the same moment Hitler took his own life in the Führer bunker in Berlin. The synchronicity was so exact that even hardened American officers exchanged uneasy glances. It was a coincidence too perfect to ignore. Even General Patton, who personally inspected the relic, wrote in his private notes, "Either the devil watches over it, or something older." May 4th, 1945. Nuremberg was a skeleton of what it once had been. Entire districts lay in ruins, charred stone, collapsed beams, hollow buildings whose walls still whispered the echoes of marching boots and roaring crowds. Smoke drifted across shattered streets like wandering ghosts. The Third Reich, the empire that promised 1,000 years, had lasted barely 12. American troops of the U.S. 7th Army moved carefully through the devastation. There was no resistance left. No soldiers hiding in alleyways, no snipers on rooftops. Just silence. But the men had orders, strict orders. Secure all high-value objects. Confiscate any Nazi artifacts, documents, or items of religious or historical significance. What they did not know was that beneath their feet, hidden behind reinforced walls and sealed vaults, lay something connected, by rumor, by myth, by coincidence, to Adolf Hitler's final breath. The sealed vault. Beneath Nuremberg. In the basement of a partially destroyed administrative building, American engineers discovered an underground vault. The heavy steel door was warped by bomb blasts but intact. It had been locked from the inside. Cutting torches shrieked, sparks cascaded. At last the metal gave way with a groaning sigh. A rush of cold air poured out, unnaturally cold, as if the chamber had been isolated from the world for centuries rather than months. Inside lay a room stripped bare by retreating SS teams, empty display frames, broken crates, smashed vitrines, scorched wooden shelves. But in one corner, there was something untouched. A long, narrow case. Its hinges rusted but solid, its lock still shut. An officer knelt down and snapped them open. Inside was a dark iron spearhead, cracked, bound with metal bands, resting like a sleeping animal. The spear of destiny. One soldier, years later, wrote in a private note, "The moment we opened that case, the air grew colder. Not like a draft, like stepping into a place you shouldn't be." The spear and Hitler's death. The U.S. Army recorded the moment of the spear's capture. April 30th, 1945, 2:10 p.m. Only later did historians compare this timestamp to another event happening across Germany, hundreds of miles away. Adolf Hitler's death. He shot himself in the Führer bunker at approximately 2:30 p.m., a 20-minute difference. For 12 years, the spear had been under Nazi control. For 12 years, assassination plots against Hitler had failed in ways that defied statistical explanation. Bombs that didn't explode, briefcases moved inches in the wrong direction, mechanical fuses malfunctioning delays of seconds that changed everything. Rooms switched at the last minute. Coincidences. All coincidences, until the moment Hitler lost possession of the relic. 20 minutes later, he was dead. Even some Allied officers raised eyebrows at the timing. Patton inspects the relic. When the spear was transported to an Allied holding site, one man requested to see it personally, General George S. Patton. Patton was not a superstitious man, but he was a man of history. He believed in destiny, in echoes of ancient battles, in the strange currents that flowed through time. When soldiers laid the spear on the table, Patton said nothing for nearly a minute. Then he whispered, "This weapon has killed more men across history than any modern gun." An aide asked whether he truly believed the spear held supernatural power. Patton did not break eye contact with the relic. Power? No, something older. He never elaborated. The next morning he ordered, "Move it, secure it, and don't bring it near ammunition or explosives." It was a strange request. Nobody questioned it. Himmler's last words. While Patton inspected the spear, Heinrich Himmler, the architect of the SS, founder of the Ahnenerbe, and true occult mind of the Third Reich, was fleeing in disguise. He learned that the Americans had seized the spear. Witnesses say he froze, turned pale, and whispered, "It must never fall into enemy hands. The Führer must not allow it." He didn't know it yet. Hitler was already dead. During a final interrogation by the British, before Himmler poisoned himself, he spoke one last chilling sentence. The spear was our beginning and our ruin. The trail of impossible coincidences. After the war, historians and skeptics tried to dismiss the spear's legend, and they almost succeeded. Almost. Because certain facts refused to disappear. 1. Every assassination attempt on Hitler failed while he possessed the spear. Valkyrie should have killed him. The blast was powerful. It tore the room apart. And yet, the bomb was moved behind a solid oak table leg. Stauffenberg had to leave early. The wrong officer returned to the room. Ventilation was open. The meeting was moved last minute to a less confined room. Too many coincidences in too little time. 2. Hitler stayed unusually close to the spear when it was relocated. A planned military visit was suddenly canceled the same day the relic was being shipped. Hitler's personal archivist later wrote, "He behaved as if the spear were a compass needle guiding him." 3. The moment the spear left Nazi control, Adolf Hitler died. Not hours later, not days, 20 minutes. Even skeptics call it the most inconvenient coincidence in historical mythology. The Allied silence. One would expect the spear to be analyzed thoroughly by the Allies. Metal composition, historical authenticity, possible hidden inscriptions. But official Allied records show nothing. Not a single detailed scientific report. Not a full archive of photographs. Not even a definitive catalog entry. Instead, the spear was classified simply as secured. Artifact requires no further analysis. Highly unusual wording. It was returned quietly to Austria in 1946. No press release, no ceremony, no explanation. Almost as though someone decided, it's better if the world doesn't look too closely at this. The lingering mystery. Today, the spear rests in the Vienna Museum. Tourists walk past it every day, unaware of the bloody saga behind the glass. But the museum has odd protocols. Twice daily inspections. Climate controls stricter than any other medieval artifact reinforced security contingency procedures in case of blackout. Constant guards. It is the only relic with these requirements. When a journalist asked a curator why, he simply replied, "Objects with long histories tend to attract long shadows." Nothing more. The curse of its holders. Researchers have noted a terrifying pattern. Nearly every historical ruler associated with the spear met a violent or sudden end. Charlemagne died the day he lost access to it. Otto III collapsed after the spear changed hands. Frederick Barbarossa drowned after leaving it behind. The Habsburgs saw internal collapse after moving it from palace to palace. Hitler died minutes after the Americans captured it. Coincidence? Maybe. But the pattern is consistent. The spear protects until the moment it abandons you. Then destiny unravels. The Lost Ahnenerbe Files. After the war, the Allies confiscated more than 10 tons of Ahnenerbe documents. Strangely, between 1946 and 1952, almost 40% of those files vanished. Vanished, not destroyed, not archived, not transferred. Gone. Among the missing files were translations of inscriptions found on the spear notes from occult rituals at Wewelsburg Castle, Meta-analysis reports letters between Himmler and Hitler discussing the relic research on ancient civilizations tied to the lance. Why those documents? Why only those? No one knows. Or no one has admitted knowing. The American soldier's testimony. In 1998, Thomas Franklin O'Leary, a veteran of the 7th Army, gave an interview to a small local newspaper. He had been there the day the spear was recovered. He said, "Some officers joked it was Nazi superstition. Others, well, you could tell they didn't want to be near it. I remember a colonel saying, 'Don't store that thing near anything explosive. We don't know what the hell it does.'" O'Leary claimed the spear had a presence. His final words in that interview were chilling. It felt like the room got quieter when you looked at it. The final theory, the spear. On display today may not be the original. In the early 2000s, a controversial theory emerged among researchers. The spear currently displayed in Vienna might be a replica. Why do some believe this? Microscopic alloy differences compared to pre-war records, cracks that appear newer than they should old photographs, showing slightly different binding patterns, U.S. archival silence, anonymous testimonies from former intelligence officers. The most extreme version of the theory suggests the Americans tested the real spear, didn't like the results, and quietly swapped it. There is no proof, but the theory refuses to die because the disappearance of Ahnenerbe documents lines up eerily well with the timeline of the spear's return, an object still searching for its master. For historians, the Spear of Destiny is a relic of the early Middle Ages. For theologians, it is a symbol of faith. For occultists, it is an artifact of immeasurable power. For skeptics, it is a legend twisted by propaganda and fantasy. But for those who have studied Hitler's rise, for those who have tracked the eerie coincidences, for those who understand the strange psychological aura surrounding the relic, the question is not about the past. It is about the present and the future. Because if the legend is true, if a relic can bind itself to the fate of its holder, then one final question remains. Who holds the Spear of Destiny now? And what destiny is it shaping in silence? In the darkest vaults of Nuremberg, in the ruins of a dying empire, American soldiers opened a simple wooden case. Inside lay a relic older than kingdoms, older than Christianity, older than the myths built around it. A spear that marched with emperors, a spear that survived crusades and betrayals, a spear that, according to legend, could alter the fate of nations. Hitler believed it guarded him. Himmler believed it spoke to him. Patton believed it carried a weight no ordinary weapon could hold, and when it slipped from Nazi hands, the Reich collapsed within minutes. Coincidence? Fate? Curse? History may someday decide, but one truth remains undeniable. The Spear of Destiny has always chosen its masters, and one day it may choose again.